Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. I'm going to skip over the Caesar to Britain episodes of this particular Caesar series. If you guys want me to go back and hit them, I can. The reason I skipped over it is because, in my opinion, the Caesar to Britain escapade was essentially entirely about Roman propaganda. So, you know, it is what it is. Nothing substantially was, nothing substantial happened there. Things got riled up back in Gaul, but we're getting back to what's going on in Gaul. So, like I said, if you want me to go back and hit it, I will, but I thought for the time being, I'll skip over it. I'm wanting to get the Sabaton history part of To Hell and Back out this afternoon. I have not entirely decided if I'm going to put out the Sabaton history part next, or if I'm going to go ahead and jump into the next Sabaton song. I'm playing it by ear, but we're going to do this one, Caesar, then there will be some form of Sabaton up next, and then I believe the series I'm going to get into, the actual series I'm going to get into after the D-Day series, is going to be Extra History's Bismarck series on catching the Bismarck. And the reason for that, obviously, is because we just did Sabaton's Bismarck song, so I figured it's a good time to hit that. With all that being said, let's get into it. Alesia, 52 BC, Caesar's Gallic Wars.
After years of campaigning, Caesar had lost his first open battle against the Gauls, this time led in a revolt by the Arverni king Vercingetorix. His allies, both in Rome and in Gaul, were now wary of the situation and would pounce if he couldn't prove that he was still in control. The final chapter of the Gallic War is about to start. The sponsor of this video, Raid Shadow Legends, is a brand new collection RPG game. This game is taking the world by storm as almost 10 million players worldwide have already downloaded it in just a program to start your journey. While Caesar was fighting a losing battle against Vercingetorix at Gergovia, his best legate, Titus Labienus, was sent to deal with rebellions in northern Gaul. Local Gauls, emboldened by Vercingetorix and led by Camulogenus, were consolidating around modern Paris, which was called Lutetia at that time and was the capital of the Parisii. Labienus had left a legion near Agedincum in order to have a supply line to Caesar and marched with 4 more legions towards Lutetia. His troops took Metlosedum along the way, but their attempts to cross the river Seine were blocked by Camulogenus. Labienus was forced to retreat back to Metlosedum. Luckily for him, his scouts had found another crossing near Metlosedum. He crossed there and moved against the Gauls. However, Camulogenus used Vercingetorix's scorched earth tactic, burning Lutetia and retreating to the swamps beyond.
And this is what the Gauls want to do, right? Vercingetorix has basically pleaded with the rest of the Gallic powers to go scorched earth. And the reason for that is he believes, and probably rightly so, that the best chance that the Gauls have against the Romans is to deprive them of any ability to forage and then string out the war, right? Basically make the Romans have to pull back into Roman territory in order to resupply. And so that's the game plan. Vercingetorix is pushing the other powers to do that, and it's hit and miss. Some are on that side. Some say, no, there's too much history and culture and all that stuff. So it depends on what group of Gauls it is, on how far they take that directive. But in my opinion, that's the move here, because they've gotten, just massacred in these open field battles with the Romans. And so doing something different, doing something logistical seems like the best chance that they have to pull out a victory here.
At the same time, Labienus learned about Caesar's defeat at Gergovia, which provoked a big Gallic tribe called Bellovaci, led by Corius, to rebel. So he knew that he had to retreat beyond the Seine and unite with his legion in Agedincum. Labienus' decision to divide his forces into three provoked Camulogenus into attacking him to the south of Lutetia without waiting for the Bellovaci, and in the ensuing battle, the Romans used the fact that their divided forces were closer to each other. Each group supported the other, and the legions managed to defeat the Gauls with ease. Camulogenus was killed in the process, which slowed down the consolidation of the anti-Roman rebellion in northern Gaul. Caesar and Labienus both retreated towards Agedincum, where they united their forces. Meanwhile, more and more Gauls were joining the rebellion, and after the rest of the Aedui joined it, even the Roman province of Narbonensis was attacked by them. Caesar and his 10 legions moved through the Sequani and Lingonese territory to the east, in order to gain a line of retreat to the Roman province of Gallia Transalpina.
And also part of Vercingetorix's plan here is, part of going scorched earth is you're trying to deny the Romans the ability to resupply, right? But if the Romans have major allies in the region that are Gallic, then that doesn't really work. They can get resupplied through their Gallic allies. So part of what Vercingetorix is doing here is almost like with Hannibal, it's a campaign of trying to pull Rome's allies from them, right? He is reaching out continuously to the Roman allies in the region, saying, essentially, it's all or nothing here, right? We're either all going to stand up to Rome and there will be a united Gallic front, or we're all going to fall individually. And even though a lot of them are, they're kind of holdouts and seeing what is happening, Vercingetorix does really well overall at bringing the Gallic tribes together. And really, this does not happen very often. In these tribal areas, most of their squabbles with each other go back so far that they would rather ally with the Romans just to spite, some neighbor tribe that they hate. Vercingetorix does a really good job at pulling all of the tribes together and offering like a united free Gallic front.
At the same time, Caesar's envoys secured a group of Germanic mercenaries who joined the Roman cavalry. Vercingetorix and his 80,000 tried to attack Caesar when the latter was trying to cross the Vingaiani River, but the Romans were able to stop the attack with ease. It is not clear why, but this minor defeat either disheartened Vercingetorix or showed him that he couldn't win against the Romans in an open battle, so he probably tried to recreate the factors that led to the victory at Gergovia when he retreated to the Mandubii capital of Alesia. Caesar followed him to the settlement.
This might be one of Caesar's most brilliant strategic plays.
Alesia was a well-defended city on a hill, and Vercingetorix sent messages to his nearby allies to come to his aid. Vercingetorix was in a strong position. He outnumbered Caesar, commanding a force of up to 80,000 men, and was surrounded by allies who would be able to quickly send men to reinforce him. From his position, it should be a simple rerun of Gergovia. He would wait on the high ground for his allies to arrive so they could either disrupt the Roman supply lines or attack them in the rear. Caesar had learnt his lesson though. Despite his smaller numbers, he immediately began the work of fully surrounding and besieging Alesia, something which Vercingetorix had been able to prevent him doing at Gergovia. The Romans began constructing a 16-kilometer wall, fully encircling the entire city, complete with palisades, trenches and towers, hoping to cut off any escape. Vercingetorix sent his cavalry out to try and disrupt these works, but the legions were able to form a defensive line to hold them, while the German auxiliaries flanked around the side. The Germans proved to be vital to the Roman cause, and their superior horsemanship forced the Gallic cavalry to retreat back into the city, killing many as they were funneled into the narrow gates. Realizing that he would soon be completely surrounded, Vercingetorix decided to send out what was left of his cavalry at night to sneak past the Roman line and head to the nearby tribes to request reinforcements as soon as possible. Upon completing the first wall, Caesar learned from some Gallic deserters that these messengers had been sent, and so constructed a second wall, this one almost 21 kilometers long and complete with 2 trenches and a moat, facing outwards to protect against any Gallic reinforcements, creating a donut-like structure with Alesia in the center. He next sent out huge foraging parties to collect enough food to sustain his troops for the next 30 days. In doing this, Caesar had effectively robbed Vercingetorix of his advantages. With the Romans thus defended and supplied, it was the Gauls who now faced a well-dug-in enemy, and it was now Vercingetorix whose time was running out. With an army of 80,000 men inside the city, plus the civilian population and no way of resupplying, it was only a matter of time before he was starved out. This was Caesar's magnum opus. Faced with a desperate situation, Vercingetorix made the difficult decision to expel anyone who wasn't going to be fighting.
Okay, so a couple of things here. One, look at the brilliance of Caesar here. This might be when it's most on display, right? So he's trying to essentially blockade Vercingetorix and his army in Alesia, and so he builds a wall around it and makes sure that nobody can get in or out, right? But they're in hostile territory with hostile tribes all around them. They know that Vercingetorix has already sent, messengers out to gather men. And so to counter that, he sets up the second wall, sets up the moat, sets up the trenches, which, by the way, moats and trenches are the name of the game at this time period, because it's the way that you stop siege equipment from getting right up to your walls, right? But look at the situation here. If the Vercingetorix and his troops in Alesia attack outwards, there's a wall there to stop them. So you have troops that can man that wall, right? Then if an army is raised outside and comes to relieve this army, you have the outer wall that you can man in order to push them out. Now, as brilliant as this is, I think that the Gauls got too disheartened too quickly. Had they known how close Caesar's army was to breaking when they eventually do their attack, they could have still overrun it. However, this is a brilliant setup. It's a brilliant way of kind of boxing your two enemies out, right? So that you're not fighting literally just back-to-back two armies, one on each side of you. Just really, really smart here. Now, on kind of a different note, the decision that Vercingetorix makes to kick out essentially the civilians of Alesia, and Caesar not allowing them through, not giving them food, sending them back basically, and we talk about a lot of wars on this channel. Wars are very interesting to study, but this is the reality for war. This is the reality of what it is. Not only the soldiers that have volunteered or this is their job, they're being paid, but what happens to the civilians during war? Jocko Willink is a famous ex-Navy SEAL here in the United States, and one of the things that he has said that really is interesting to me is if, as a country, you are going to go to war, there are three things that you have to understand. There will be enemy people that are killed, right? So you have enemy hostiles that they will be killed. That's one. You also will have troops of your own from your country that die during this conflict. Like, it's a war, it's going to happen. And three, there will be civilian deaths. As much as, that's not what people are trying to do, that's not the game plan, there will be civilian deaths. And so his whole thing is, if, as a country, you cannot stomach those three things, if whatever it is that you're upset about or arguing about or whatever, if you can't stomach that over whatever we're angry about, that enemy people will die, soldiers of the country that we are in my case, the United States, U.S. soldiers will die, and civilians will die. If whatever the issue is not worth those things, then you shouldn't make the decision to go to war, because this is the reality of what war is. And the civilians that are sent out of Alesia are when they leave that gate, they are being sentenced to death for something that, all in all, they really have nothing to do with.
Old, the sick, women and children. He had hoped that Caesar would allow these people through the Roman defences and to safety, but Caesar was not in a merciful mood. He refused to let them pass, and the civilians were left between the walls of Alesia and the Romans, imploring both sides for food and water, neither side relenting. Over the next few days, many died of starvation and thirst, the space between the armies becoming full of the dying and dead. The Gallic allies finally arrived to try and relieve the siege, under the command of Vercingetorix's cousin, Vercassivelanus. It is hard to say precisely how many there were. Caesar claims that the number was as high as 250,000, with modern estimates suggesting somewhere between 70 and 100,000. Whatever the true number was, all agree that the Romans were now significantly outnumbered, at least 2-1. On the first day of their arrival, they quickly filled in the first Roman trench and sent across a combined force of light infantry and cavalry to probe the defences, whilst the rest of the army set up camp. Caesar countered by sending out his own Germanic cavalry, and a fierce skirmish ensued. From their elevated position inside the city, the besieged Gauls saw that their allies had arrived, and simultaneously began massing for a sally against the inner fortifications. However, the Germans once again proved their skill, outmaneuvering and flanking their Gallic counterparts, forcing them back across the trench and into the Gallic camp. Seeing his allies defeated, Vercingetorix decided to bide his time and held off his attack. The reinforcements spent the next day constructing siege ladders, and then at midnight launched another attack. Taking the Romans by surprise, they found some initial success, but Mark Antony, in his first battle, was commanding this section of the wall and proved himself to be a composed and skillful lieutenant, pulling troops from other sections of the walls to reinforce his position. Again, Vercingetorix began to sally out to try and help his allies, but was delayed by having to fill the Roman trench. By the time he had crossed it, Antony had successfully fought off the assault, and Vercingetorix again withdrew into the city. Following these two failed assaults, Vercassivelanus conducted more thorough reconnaissance of the Roman position, and discovered that a steep hill overlooked the Roman wall in the northern section. Hoping to use this high ground to his advantage, the next day the Gauls used their overwhelming numbers to attack the entire length of the outside wall, but concentrated a larger force under Vercassivelanus on this portion. At the same time, Vercingetorix again sallied out, this time attacking the length of the interior Roman fortifications, hitting wherever looked weakest. This was the toughest the fighting had been so far. Caesar, as he had done at the Battle of Sabis, dashed from cohort to cohort, urging his men on, leading reserve cohorts personally to points where the defences looked like they were faltering. The Cassivellaunus began making headway, piling earthworks up against the walls in order to mount them, and using hooks and siege engines to tear down the Roman defences. Caesar committed every man he had left of his reserves, pulling every man who could be spared and sending them into the action. It was a desperate battle for the Romans. Between the two walls there would be no escape, and if the line faltered, the entire army would surely be wiped out. The Roman line was holding the Gallic army, but it seemed like it wouldn't last for long. But then, Caesar appeared at the top of the hill. Leading the Germanic auxiliaries, he crashed into the rear of the Gallic reinforcements. Surrounded now on all sides, the Gauls who had pushed through the breach were decimated and the tide of battle changed. Seeing their largest contingent broken, the morale of the rest of the Gallic reinforcements shattered and they quickly fled.
So this is the point where the Gauls could have broken through, I believe. The Romans didn't have any more reserves, but the Gauls don't know that, right? The Gauls are just fighting, and as they're taking losses, they lose morale and they start to go. But had they continued to fight, they probably break through the line here.
With this threat thus neutralized, the Romans turned to deal with Vercingetorix, who was attacking the interior wall, and they were able to force him back into the city. With the city still besieged and his reinforcements spent, Vercingetorix surrendered. It is unknown how many Romans died, but the casualties must have been fairly significant given the intensity of the fighting, particularly at the point where the fortifications had been breached. The Gallic relief force suffered heavy casualties, the entirety of the besieged army in Alesia was either killed or enslaved, and both Cassivellaunus and Vercingetorix were taken alive. Although most of the rebel leaders were either dead or captured, the resistance against Rome was far from over, as the Bituriges, Carnutes, Bellovaci, Atrebates, Anticavi, and others were still in open rebellion. In January of 51 BC,
the fall of Alesia and Vercingetorix, though, is really the fall of that united Gallic resistance. So the main resistance of the Gauls fell with Alesia.
Caesar moved against the Bituriges. This winter campaign surprised the Bituriges, who were probably unprepared for it, and soon they sued for peace, which allowed Caesar to return to his winter quarters. However, soon the Bituriges were attacked by the Carnutes for yielding to the Romans. Once again, Caesar marched swiftly and took his enemies by surprise, forcing the Carnutes to submit. The Romans made new winter quarters at Cenabum and stayed there until the spring. Leaving 6 legions in the area, Caesar took 4 and moved against the Bellovaci of Corius and the Atrebates of Commius. This campaign proved difficult, as both tribes abandoned their lands and fought a guerrilla war against the Romans. Fortunately for the legions, Corius was killed in one of the ambushes, which proved to be the final straw for the Bellovaci. They were convinced to seek peace, while Commius retreated to the east to continue his resistance. To the south, the Anticavi attacked Liminum and were defeated by Caesar's lieutenants. The remainder of the Gallic forces in the area attempted to defend at Uxellodunum, but were defeated by Caesar soon after. The last engagement of the war saw Commius defeated in the north, and the rebellion was over. Gaul was pacified, and Caesar won over the remaining Gallic leaders with gifts and the promise of lower tribute. He knew that the battle for Rome was about to start. The civil war that would end the centuries-long republic was just around the corner. Thus ends the first season of our series on Gaius Julius Caesar, but he will be back for the second season, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel.
Okay, so that was Alesia, Caesar's Gallic War documentary. the best part about, the whole Caesar story is the Civil War, at least to me. Although the Gallic Wars are very interesting in their own right. But, it's the fall of the Republic. So it's a very interesting thing. So I'm anxious to, continue this series into the actual Civil War. Like I said, I'm hoping to get another Sabaton video out later this afternoon. And part 4 of the D-Day series will be out tomorrow. Like, comment, subscribe. Help me keep building the channel over here. And I will see all of you next time.